necessarily those of LRN.FM, Tuiville, the Illinois Libertarian Party, and a bunch of other people.
We'd like to invite you and all the members of your household
to gather around and join us now
for a very special episode of
Side Project Live.
And what's so special about it?
I'm not wearing any pants.
And welcome once again, friends, neighbors, Romans, countrymen, to a very special, rainy, coffee, nasally episode of Side Project Live. Suffering from a cold in Morris, Illinois, or getting over a cold in Morris, Illinois, this is Jimmy G.
Still suffering from a serious cold, but getting better a little bit each day. From Lockport, Illinois, it's Eric Ferguson.
And so that the other two don't feel left out, recovering from a cold in Indianapolis, Indiana, Lex Zorn.
Well, this has been a very interesting week. Took last week off because I had some personal things that I needed to attend to, and so apologize for that. This week we got things going on, and I've been... As you listen to the show, you'll notice that I've been coughing quite a bit. I had gotten a really, really mild cold, and since I suffer from mild asthma and get bronchitis really easy, I've been coughing up a storm. And of course, I signed up and paid like $40 for a 70-mile bike ride, which is tomorrow morning. And of course, tomorrow is supposed to be sunny and dry, 36 degrees at the ride start. So that's going to be fun. I had to go out and buy myself some long bicycling pants, for all the ladies that are interested that want to see my butt. But so that's been very, very interesting. It's going to be an interesting ride tomorrow morning, especially with me coughing up a storm. And so yeah, there's that. Couple of announcements. First of all, the typical stuff that I will get sued for if I don't read it at the start of the show. You can leave us a voicemail at our Google Voice number, 815-200-4912. Our Twitter is the Side Project 2. It's, the @ the Side Project 2. Make sure you have the word the, and it's the number 2, not TWO or TO or TOO, for those who don't know the difference. And our email address is thesideproject2. That's thesideproject number 2 @gmail.com. And if you want to post something and get our... to get our attention, you can use a hashtag SPLive. We'll find it, and maybe we'll find the concert dates for the Sugar Pies. You never know. I also wanted to note that friends of the show, the conservative atheist podcast, the Bitch Spot Report, apparently is back, and apparently they've been back since the end of the month, and I would have known that if I hadn't taken them off of my Stitcher feed. I did that because I thought they were gone for good, but nope, they're back, so... You'll want to go check them out. Their website is, and of course I don't know how to spell that. No, their website is report.jadedragon.com. So you'll want to go there. The guy actually has a blog at jadedragon.com as well, I believe. And so you'll want to check them out. And then finally, me and a friend that I've known since, 25 years, 30 years now. Probably about 25. Guy's name is Dauber. Me and him are actually starting up a podcast that has absolutely nothing to do with politics, religion, skepticism, any of that. It's about classic video arcade games, and we're calling it The Pie Factory. And no, it's not a pornographic podcast. It's like I said, classic video games. The Pie Factory, as everybody knows, is the fourth screen of the arcade game Donkey Kong. And if you want to, excuse me, we've already put out an episode 0. So if you want to check that out, the URL, the website is fab4it.com/piefactory. Fab4, the number 4IT. Dauber's a huge fan of the Beatles, if you haven't guessed. Fab4it.com/piefactory, you'll find it. We're going to get a different URL for that before too long, but there's that. You can also look up Pie Factory Podcast on Facebook, And as long as you're at it, and I keep forgetting to mention this, and I should put it on my my notes here, Side Project Live, we do have a Facebook page as well, so just go to facebook.com, look for the Side Project Live, and you'll find us. And there you go.
That'd be a good name for the math club if you go to a math competition. Pie Factory.
Yeah.
You know, I came of age, you know, the same time you did, and I was a video game fanatic in those days. So if you ever need any special guests, I'll be glad to come on, you know, for some episodes.
Well, you never know. The whole concept is that there are other classic arcade game podcasts, and a lot of them go into, you know, scoring competitions and and technical stuff about the games and all of that. This is pretty much going to be a show about our recollections and you know, the games themselves and the gameplay. And the very first episode we're going to, and every show is going to be themed. We don't tell people the theme, but we'll tell them what the games are, and then they'll kind of figure out what the theme is. For our first full episode, we're going to be doing the games Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong 3. So, and the theme isn't Donkey Kong, but there is a theme, so people figure that out. And so far for our second show, we've decided we're going to do the Atari, the only Laserdisc game Atari ever put out, which is Firefox, based on the Clint Eastwood movie, which it's got scenes from the movie and all that. I absolutely loved that game. It didn't get very good reviews for the gameplay, but I say screw them. It was an awesome game. And a lot of people don't know this. Atari actually had a second Laserdisc game in the works, and it almost came out. In fact, there is a prototype out there. It always gets shown at some classic arcade game show out in California. The game eventually did come out, but in a non-Laserdisc game, and the game is Roadrunner, based on the Warner Brothers cartoon.
Oh.
Gameplay on the version that came out, the graphics are all computer generated, you know, as like a regular game, and the gameplay is exactly the same as what the Laserdisc version was going to be. The difference was that in the Laserdisc version, all of the main characters are computer generated, but the background was all hand-drawn art. And whenever you killed Wile E. Coyote, it showed a clip from the classic Warner Brothers cartoons. And go to YouTube and look it up. It's really, really, really cool. And I really wish Atari would have come out with it, because that would have been an awesome game. The game is still fun to play in its current form, but it would have been much more awesome if they had released the Laserdisc version. And I guess as long as we're talking about Atari prototype arcade games, a lot of people don't know this, is Atari actually had a prototype arcade game based on Beavis and Butthead. And they got programmed up to the first 4 levels. The last 2 never got programmed, but the prototype with the cabinet is out there, and it gets once again shown at an arcade convention out in California, I believe. And it's kind of a beat-em-up in the style of like Double Dragon, that sort of thing. I don't know. I could leave it or take it. I'd probably have to play it to see it, but yeah, it's when I first found out that they had that, I was like, whoa. So, but we'll probably talk about that more in the second episode of Pie Factory. But we're going to be recording episode 1 this week, and hopefully we'll have those available every Wednesday for new ones. So just keep watching us. We've already submitted to the iTunes store, and after we get a couple of episodes under our belt, we're going to submit to Stitcher. So there you go.
Well, that's great, and you know, like I said, I'd love to come in and be a special guest on some episodes, because I have so many great memories of playing video games in the early '80s, going to the arcades and everything. So anyway,
you know, there is a documentary out there. Is it about this? I can't remember, but I swear that I saw that there was a documentary about the arcade culture. I can't think of the name of it. It wasn't like a documentary you'd see in television, but oh gosh, or am I confusing that with something else? I know Howard Scott Warshaw, the guy that programmed and designed Yara's Revenge, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and E.T. for the Atari 2600, and had an unreleased prototype game he programmed called Saboteur, which Atari wanted him to remake into a tie-in for the TV show The A-Team. He had a documentary series. Oh, no, it wasn't him. No, it wasn't him. It was Warren Robinette, the guy who programmed Adventure for Atari. He had a documentary series called Once Upon Atari. And it was like a 4-part, 1 hour each episode documentary. I hear is really good. I haven't watched it yet. I really want to see this. And then a couple of friends of mine from Atari age, Marty Goldberg and oh God, what the hell is his name? Oh God, I thought I was going to forget the other name. Marty Goldberg and the guy runs AtariMuseum.com. They have 2 books out, and they're working on a 3rd one. The first book is called Atari Business is Fun, which is when Atari went out of business, him and I just had the name and it left again. But Marty Goldberg and his friend were out in California near Atari headquarters, and when they were closed down, they went through the dumpsters and they retrieved a lot of documents and just stuff that they threw away. And they've compiled 2 books out of all this information. I hear the books are really long, and they got the 3rd book on the way, which I think is going to be released later this year if it hasn't been released already. And supposedly these books are fantastic, and I want to get a hold of them. But the first one is Atari Business is Fun. The second one is Atari Business is War. The first one is about the early days. The second book is about from when Warner Brothers took over Atari to the time, I believe, to the demise after the Tramiels took over. The Tramiels being the people that founded Commodore Business Machines. And real interesting bit of history there. I'm going on and on about this. I could go on and on about video games.
The Commodore saga is quite interesting too. Well, many times that changed hands, and
indeed. In fact, Tramiels got ousted.
All caught up in that mess, and man, oh man.
What's really funny is that there were a couple of people inside Atari that were developing a 16-bit line of computers, and they brought it to the attention of the Tramiels, who were in charge of Atari at the time. And the Tramiels were like, nope, we're not interested. And so these Atari designers sold it to Commodore. And this computer, which should have been an Atari computer, became the Commodore Amiga.
Yeah.
And then Atari hired, I believe, a couple of ex-Commodore people to design the Atari ST line of 16-bit computers.
I tell you,
it's really weird.
Yeah, if the wars and the bankruptcies and all that nonsense didn't happen back then, who knows what our computer technology might be. Because back when, your the Intel format, the IBM format PC was running at, 12 megahertz with a monochrome screen and a speaker, a little beeper that made all the sound, the Amiga was running at, 30 megahertz in full color and polyphonic stereo. And just amazing.
It's really funny. We're going to get to the main topic here in just one moment, but it's really funny that Atari is just a shell of its former self now. I mean, they're still in business, surprisingly. But if you look back at the movie Blade Runner, and I can't remember what year that movie takes place in, but it's in the future. What's that?
2019.
2019.
Yeah.
There's a shot where they're panning over future Los Angeles, and they got this huge pyramid tower. And the Atari logo in all its glory is there. Like, they're still, like, number one in the business.
Yeah.
That I just love that. I just think that's hilarious. But
I'll watch that next time I watch. That's a favorite movie of mine.
Yeah, I have never seen it all the way through. It's one of those movies that I just see bits and pieces of. It's on my list, but it's just like I always forget to watch it. And when we had Trace Molyneux on, he was chiding me for having never seen Godfather. That's on my list too, but there's just so many movies, and it just anymore it's kind of hard to find. But anyway, we should get moving on to our main topic here. About 3 days ago, April 22nd, is what is known as. No, it's not known as that. Oh, excuse me. It's known as Earth Day. Well. I told you, everybody, this is going to be a fun episode today with all of the sounds coming out of our mouths that are not normal. Of course, whenever is a sound coming out of our mouths normal. At any rate, but a few days ago was Earth Day. Just a quick little, thing about it from Wikipedia. Earth Day is an annual event celebrated on April 22nd. There you go. Oh, wait a minute. No, there's more. On which day events worldwide are held to demonstrate support for environmental protection. It was first celebrated in 1970, is now coordinated globally by the Earth Day Network, and celebrated in more than 192 countries each year. In 1969, at a UNESCO conference in San Francisco, and I hit the spacebar and my browser screen just scrolled down, the San Francisco peace activist John McConnell proposed a day to honor the Earth and the concept of peace to be celebrated on March 21st, 1970. The first day of spring in the Northern Hemisphere. This day of nature's here's a word I've never seen before, equipoise was later sanctioned in a proclamation written by McConnell and signed by Secretary General Utant at the United Nations. A month later, a separate Earth Day was founded by the United States Senator Gaylord Nelson as an environmental teach-in, first held on April 22nd, 1970. Nelson was later awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom Award in recognition of his work. While this April 22nd Earth Day was focused on the U.S., an organization launched by Dennis Hayes, who was the original national coordinator in 1970, took it international in 1990 and organized events in 141 nations. Numerous communities celebrate Earth Week, the entire week of activities focused on environmental issues. Now, just reading this, it strikes me as interesting that I don't remember any sort of things with Earth Day before 1990. I never really thought about it before, but you never heard about it before 1990, which I thought was pretty interesting. And I don't have a problem with people being alert to, environmental issues and to issues of peace. Libertarians, we are huge on being peaceful.
Yes.
The symbol of the Free State Project, which was kind of co-opted by the National Libertarian Party, is that of the porcupine. Porcupine is a very, very peaceful creature until you try to attack it, and then get poked with all of its pointy quills. So I have no objection to all of this. And it always comes up with the whole question of global warming. Is it real? Is it fake? Or whatever. I tend to believe, it's taken me a while to come to the conclusion, but I've taken the position that, yeah, I believe that there is something happening. I don't necessarily know to what degree, to how it's being caused, but something not quite right is happening to the environment. That having been said, let's assume for a moment that global warming was fake. Let's say that it is indeed a conspiracy by government or whatever, and we're going to get into the whole government thing here in a moment. We should still be treating the Earth as if it was real. We should be still trying to live our life toward a clean environment to the best of our abilities. Not everybody can go out and afford a Prius, which actually has its own environmental problems. People think that you're saving the Earth with that, but batteries contain lead. Just let that sink in for a moment. It might be different, with a Prius and that sort of thing, but they still contain elements that you got to mine out of the ground, and no matter what kind of mine it is, you're doing environmental damage. And to put it mildly, mankind is effed. So we got to do the best we can with what we've got, and try to preserve as much as we can.
The problem is a severe lack of knowledge on the subject, and I'm hardly an expert, but I've tried to be. I try to read things and learn things, and that's the problem. People think that they're doing good when they very well are probably doing bad, and they don't realize that. There's a very simple test. Stuff costs money. It's just that simple. Stuff costs money. Labor and energy cost money. If it costs you more to do whatever it is that you're doing that's supposed to save the planet, it's doing more harm than good. It should be saving you money. If it costs less to reuse your plastic bottles, they should be more than happy to pick it up at your curb for less money. But they don't. It's about 2.5 times as expensive as just putting it in a pile. Because sorting and cleaning and all that stuff uses energy and labor, which people use energy because we're people. So if it costs you more money, it's a bad idea. That's the reason why the scrapyard will pay you for your copper.
I remember back in the day, soda pop came in the glass bottles in an 8-pack. You paid a deposit on it, and you took the bottles back to the store, you got your deposit back, and then they could just take those back to the factory. They don't have to melt them down or anything. They just have to wash them, reuse them. And now we got the plastics. You can't really just melt it down, or you can't just wash it. You got to melt it down, reconstitute it into new plastic, and it's a whole different thing. Glass is more environmentally sane than plastic
and
is.
It doesn't.
But we're going further and further away from plastic. Glass,
and it doesn't work for the same stuff. They don't take your beverage bottles and turn them back into beverage bottles. It doesn't work for the same stuff.
No.
That becomes carpet and sweatshirts.
Yeah. And then on top of it, plastic is a porous material. Glass is not. People don't realize that plastic is porous, and your drinks go bad faster. Take this challenge. Take a soda, whatever brand it is. As long as they have the same exact formula in a glass bottle, drink it from the plastic and drink it from the glass. The glass, even though it's exactly the same, will always taste better. Glass is a better choice. And people forget that the number one thing you can do with recycling, when you get like the little thingies that the margarine or sour cream come in from the store, or you get like jars that peanut butter or salsa were in or something, the glass ones, well, even the plastic ones, you can always wash those and reuse them at home. That is recycling that works. That is recycling that is inexpensive, and those products have a benefit in giving you storage containers so you don't have to go out and buy, as much Tupperware or whatever as you used to.
Yeah, and one thing that should be noted, Jim, Coke and Pepsi now are available in glass bottles here in America again. So yeah, that's a good place to start. Just get like for example here at the local Walmart, they sell 4-packs of 12-ounce bottles of Pepsi. So just get a 12-ounce Pepsi in a bottle and then 12-ounce Pepsi in a can. See what you think of it.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the soft drinks in glass have not made a comeback yet, because that is the most environmentally friendly thing to do. The cardboard that it comes with, that they used to be packed in, that is actually more easily recycled than plastic.
Yes.
And I'm surprised they haven't made a push for that. Instead, these do-gooders are trying to get rid of paper and plastic bags, and in some cities, especially San Francisco, where all this nuttiness starts, is that they've totally outlawed both paper and plastic bags. You have to bring a reusable everywhere, and it's ridiculous. I mean, there's no real benefit. I honestly, I'm not for the banning at all, but I could understand the banning of plastic. Paper, not so much. Could you get a good paper bag? You got a bazillion uses for that around the house.
Yeah.
You can use it. I mean, I've seen people use it to make like mulch out of it. Put your plants in there. Tie up the bottom of it, and then you can plant it, and that stuff degrades, and it's good for the soil, unlike plastic. But people should be making the choice, and in the sane choice, paper bags are best. Government always does what it thinks is good, but in reality, government's problem, there are too many cooks in the kitchen. And we got all these people, they push the bills, and people like to think that that gridlock is good in Congress, and to a degree that's correct, but you get too many people involved, then you get the worst from both sides of the aisle instead of the best. Compromise always brings you down a watered-down, not-so-good product.
Yeah, and, my thoughts on Earth Day are this. I mean, yeah, we as libertarians, we are indeed peace-loving people, and, we do believe in responsible conservation, but where we differ from liberals, is in the way to achieve these goals. I mean, for example, with peace, a lot of liberals think that we just need to basically hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and basically I saw this ridiculous quote attributed to Dianne Feinstein the other day. I don't know if she actually said it, but basically she was attributed as saying that if you're a gunman and then you come into a place and you see that nobody else is armed, you're just going to naturally put your gun down, which is one of the most ignorant things I've ever heard. and so we believe that people will be safer if more good, responsible people are armed. Now, as for the environment, yeah, Eric really hit the nail on the head when he said people have lack of knowledge. I still remember back at the first major Earth Day 25 years ago, Danson saying that we only had 12 years left to save the Earth. And what was really frustrating to me at the time is that, where was the media scrutinizing him? I mean, yes, it's the right to say things that are nonsensical, but people are not required to take him seriously. Where was the media saying what are Ted Danson's credentials for saying this? Is there any validity to it? And then finally, on top of that, what basis does anybody have believing that government can be trusted to clean up the environment when we see government's abysmal record around the world of caring for the environment, not to mention the abysmal record at everything else?
Right. I got some stuff on that too if we want to get into that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, people need to know stuff, and it's hard to know because the press doesn't tell you. They only want to tell you what's sensational. If it bleeds, it leads. That's all that matters. So, if some talking heads on the TV talking about, foreign oil because of all of our plastic, they let them go, even though most of the plastic doesn't come from oil. Oops.
The thing that gets me is the whole buy local thing, and they go with, well, if you buy local, I mean, not only you're helping your local businesses, but you're saving energy. They don't have to drive as far, blah, 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 blah. But the fact of the matter is, if the study that I read was correct, that you actually save money, you use less fuel if you buy something that was hauled in from a truck. Because first of all, unlike local deliveries where you'd have to stop here, whereas if you get something long haul, you can just load the damn thing up and make a haul to boom, one place, and in the long run uses less fuel, which is good for the environment. I have to relook at the study. I don't remember it exactly, but it's all of this stuff. I mean, things that sound good on the surface, just if you really think about it and if you really look at it, just have the opposite effect.
Yeah.
And then everybody's like, oh well, BP, they got that old huge oil spill down state. Oh, and the commercial I've been seeing on TV lately. They're talking about they have the apology from the head of BP for the oil spill, and I'm not saying that the oil spill was horrible. It really was, but they're using this as propaganda to try to get a bill passed here in Illinois for more government funding for ethanol. Yet I've read studies that say that ethanol is actually biofuels are worse for the environment. They actually contribute more to global warming than oil does.
I didn't know that, but it's not surprising, and it's just another example of the law of unintended consequences. And for all the talk about big government throughout history has harmed the environment more than capitalism has, more than large corporations have. Jim, I remember you told a great story about the environmental disasters in the former USSR, and of course we know about Chernobyl, and you can imagine if Chernobyl had happened in a Western capitalist country, the field day that the left would have had about it, but obviously because it happened to a communist country, it was just brushed under the rug.
It's interesting that you bring this up, because I've actually mentioned this before.
Yeah.
But the most polluted place on Earth is a government facility.
Of course.
It's Lake Karachay in Russia, in the former Soviet Union. It's in the southern Ural Mountains in central Russia. Starting in 1951, the Soviet Union used Karachay as a dumping site for radioactive waste from Mayak, the nearby nuclear waste storage and reprocessing facility. The history. Built in total secrecy and great haste between 1945 and 1948, the Mayak plant was the first reactor for the creation of plutonium for the Soviet atomic bomb project. In accordance with Stalinist procedure and supervised by NKVD chief Lavrentiy Beria, production of enough weapon-grade material to match U.S. nuclear superiority following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was given the utmost priority. Little to no consideration was paid to worker safety, there's a shock, or responsible disposal of waste materials, and the reactors were optimized for plutonium production, producing many tons of contaminated materials and utilizing primitive open-cycle cooling systems which directly contaminated every gallon of the thousands of gallons of cooling water the reactors used every day. Lake Kyzyltash, I love these Russian names, was the largest natural lake capable of providing cooling water to the reactors. It was rapidly contaminated via the open-cycle system. Lake Karachay was even closer, but too small to provide cooling water, so it quickly became a highly convenient dumping ground for massive levels of high-level radioactive waste that were too hot to store in the facility's underground storage vats. Originally, the plan was to use the lake to store the especially energetic material until it could be returned to MIAC's facility underground concrete storage vats, but this proved impossible due to the level of radioactivity, which was extraordinarily lethal. Extraordinarily lethal. The lake was used for this purpose until the Kaishem disaster in 1957, in which the underground vats exploded due to a faulty cooling system and terribly contaminated the entire MIAC area, as well as large swath of territory to the northeast. This led to greater caution among the administration, fearing an international attention, and caused dumping grounds to be spread out over a variety of areas, including several lakes and the Teka River, along which many villages lay. Starting in the 1960s, the lake began to dry out. Its area dropped from 0.5 square kilometers in 1951 to 0.15 square kilometers by the end of 1993. In 1968, following a drought in the region, the wind carried 185 PBQ, which I don't know what that is, of radioactive dust away from the dried area of the lake, irradiating 500,000 people. Between 1978 and 1986, the lake was filled with almost 10,000 hollow concrete blocks to prevent sediments from shifting. And I have also heard, and read somewhere, but it's not in the article here, so take it for whatever it's worth, that it got so bad that the Soviet Union, while there was still water in the lake, just dumped dry concrete in there, just poured it in, just so that the lake doesn't even exist anymore. It's just a huge slab of concrete. The most contaminated place on the planet, and it is a government institution. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, that's, the Soviet Union, that's Russia, that's over there. Well, has any of you heard of the Hanford site?
Yep.
The Hanford site is in Washington State, and where is it here? Environmental concerns. A huge volume of Columbia River was required to dissipate the heat produced by Hanford's nuclear reactors. From 44 to 71, pump systems drew cooling water out of the river, and after treating this water for use by the reactors, returned it to the river. Before its release into the river, used water was held in large tanks known as retention basins for up to 6 hours. Longer-lived isotopes were not affected by this retention, and several terabecquerels entered the river every day. The federal government kept knowledge about these radioactive releases secret. I don't believe in those huge, bizarre conspiracy theories, but it's not to say conspiracies don't happen, and this is one of them. Radiation was later measured 200 miles downstream as far west as the Washington and Oregon coasts. The plutonium separation process resulted in the release of radioactive isotopes into the air, which were carried by the wind throughout southeast Washington into parts of Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and British Columbia. Downwinders were exposed to radionuclides, particularly iodine-131, with the heaviest releases during the period of 45 to 51. These radionuclides entered the food chain via dairy cows grazing on contaminated fields. Hazardous fallout was ingested by communities who consumed radioactive food and milk. Most of these airborne releases were a part of Hanford's routine operations, while a few of the larger releases occurred in isolated incidents. In 1949, an intentional release known as the Green Run released 8,000 curies of iodine-131 over 2 days. Another source of contaminated food came from Columbia River fish, an impact felt disproportionately by Native American communities who depend on the river for their customary diets. A U.S. government report released in 1992 estimated that 685,000 curies of radioactive iodine-131 had been released into the river and air from the Hanford site between 1944 and 1947. Beginning in the 60s, scientists with the U.S. Public Health Service published reports about radioactivity released from Hanford, and there were protests from the health departments of Oregon and Washington. In response to an article in the Spokane Spokesman Review in September of '85, the Department of Energy announced to declassify environmental records, and in February of '86, released, excuse me, 19,000 pages of previously unavailable historical documents about Hanford's operations. The Washington State Department of Health collaborated with the citizen-led Hanford Health Information Network to publicize data about the health effects of Hanford's operations. HHIN reports concluded that residents who lived downward from Hanford or who used the Columbia River downstream were exposed to elevated doses of radiation that placed them at increased risk for various cancers and other diseases. A mass tort lawsuit brought by 2,000 Hanford downwinders against the federal government has been in the court system for many years. 2 of 6 plaintiffs who went to trial in 2005 were awarded $500,000 in damages. And this just keeps going on. And I've heard some people say that this Hanford Reach site is the most contaminated site in the United States. The area around the plant has since been made a national recreation area. It might be safe. You never know. But
Nice.
But I mean, I've heard stories about we've got a nuclear reservation in South Carolina that are just as bad. I mean, these are government facilities. These are the most contaminated places on Earth. And where are the people protesting and picketing these things? They want the government to protect us, yet they're the biggest polluter.
They do. The other thing is define contamination. I mean, you target a couple of nuclear problems, but you ever visited a battery factory? I mean, it may not spew out into the wild, but I mean, what a desolate, miserable place. So, I mean, it really depends on how you define what these contaminants and polluted places are.
Indeed. Indeed. I mean, it does depend on your definition of it. And but let's go somewhere else for a second here. We're just talking about the government. The most polluted places on Earth are the government, or government facilities. But we're not letting corporations off. We're not letting big business off. We're not letting small business off.
We're not letting you off.
Yeah, everybody is a potential. Everybody is a polluter. I mean, let's face facts. Every time you exhale, you're exhaling CO2. CO2, helps toward global warming, global climate change. But
let's clear that one up. Let's clear that one up right there. CO2 is not a pollutant.
It has its uses.
It is a requirement for life on Earth. It is how things live. It is not a pollutant.
Okay. Well, let's do this then. Every time you take a dump, you're polluting. Well, but that's not even technically true, because that's fertilizer that plants can use. But my point being, though, is that everybody pollutes. Every corporation, every company, every government, everybody pollutes. That's just a given of life. The problem is the extent to which we pollute, and how can we reduce that? The problem is that we've got the EPA. We've got these carbon credit things. Carbon credits make it to where you can still pollute. You can just buy your way out of it. Yeah, there's corruption in the EPA. There have been cases of people taking bribes. There have been cases of the EPA doing shoddy investigations into things.
And by the way, who's the president of the company that sells the most carbon credits?
Al
Gore. It's Al Gore.
Yeah, isn't that convenient? There's an inconvenient truth for you right there. And the thing is that it's the fox guarding the hen house. We can't trust the government to go out there and to clean stuff up.
And remember,
I mean, we have to take it upon ourselves. And
for you dummy-crats out there that think this is the government's duty, and for you Republicans that think it's just one big huge boondoggle, the U.S. EPA was proposed and launched in 1970 by a Republican, Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. The more I hear about him, Watergate is the least of his strikes against him.
Oh yeah. I think that's one thing. It's a shame that sometimes the things that are best remembered. Yeah, it's a shame that sometimes the things someone is best remembered for are not anywhere close to the worst things the person did, and that's one example. I mean, there's a thing on Facebook. It shows a picture of Nixon and a picture of Obama side by side. Nixon said, I bugged an office and got impeached. Well, technically, he didn't get impeached. He resigned when he was about to get impeached. But anyway, then, Obama said, then Obama's saying, I bugged an entire country and you idiots love me. And yeah, I mean, I'm not letting Obama off the hook. I mean, he's been a horrible, horrible president who's just violated the Constitution in some of the worst ways. But yeah, Nixon, his misdeeds go far beyond Watergate.
Yeah, Nixon gave us the EPA and the modern drug war. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.
I love that. I love that famous picture of Nixon making Elvis a honorary agent in the war on drugs. That's the irony just seeping off of that real photo, not doctored, is just amazing. And the thing is, and let's talk about something else here. Sometimes cleaning up the mess actually makes more of a mess than leaving the mess alone. It has been widely said, and there have been studies, and don't take any of our words for anything on here. Look the stuff up. Do your due diligence. And if we say anything wrong, we've given you the contact information. thesideproject2@gmail.com, or tweet us at thesideproject2. Set us straight. We welcome it. If you have any dissenting opinions, come on the show. We had Rob Gallick on a while back in response to our episode about the scam that's student loans. We welcome this.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that all of these schools that were built 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s had this asbestos in them. And now asbestos. Oh, you see all the commercials on. If you watch daytime TV for even 2 minutes, you'll see commercials about you may have mesothelioma and not know it if you've been in a building that's had asbestos and crap like that. And there's another episode we should do about those buttholes. But excuse me. But you get to these schools and they have, you saw the ceiling tiles that had like all the stringies in them or whatever. That's your asbestos. They have to call it, and special crews come in to clean that stuff up. And what happens is that when they clean it up, they got to chip it off and and then asbestos particles come out and they float through the air. They float in the dust, and you breathe that crap in. They've got the masks and everything, but if it's just staying up there where it was and not being damaged, it's safe to keep up there until you start noticing it peeling and crumbling down by itself. You're creating more of a problem cleaning it up. And let's go into the whole Superfund site things. You got these toxic sites. How do you clean that up? I mean, I'm sure there's some chemical way to help get out the toxic materials and stuff like that. But eventually, that waste has to be stored somewhere itself. Where? How are we doing this? I mean, what is? My point is, as I said it before, mankind is screwed. We are messed up, and we're eventually, just because we're humans, going to cause our own demise. I mean, it's just inevitable. Yeah. It's up to us to try to make that day come be as far out in the future as possible.
It's critically important that you don't trust your government with this task. They are the worst at it. If you just look at greenhouse gases, okay, again, they're not a pollutant. They are required by life on Earth, but whatever. The top producing country of greenhouse gases is China. Now, people go, well, that's because China's evil and they don't have these regulations. No, how about 1 billion people? Maybe it's because there's over 1 billion people there that they're the top producer of greenhouse gas. That could have something to do with it. The top specific producer of this stuff is the United States government. We beat everybody, hands down.
Why does that not shock me?
Yeah. And for that matter, all pollutants, all the clear cutting occurs on government land. All of the pollutants, the air and the water and the land pollution, all of it is done on government property. It doesn't happen on private property because you have a vested interest in that property. The government does not.
I won't say it doesn't happen on private property, but I will say it happens far less on private property.
Well, I mean, yeah, people dump, motor oil down the drain. I mean, that happens. That kind of stuff happens.
My dad used to pour it on our gravel driveway. We had a cheap blacktop driveway after several years.
Why not? It works great for that. But our government, now federal level and state level, the whole thing, 125 million metric tons of CO2 every year. That is not including the methane and all the other stuff, just the CO2.
There's a methane to his madness.
How can that be? Very simple. The federal government owns 500,000 buildings, 600,000 vehicles.
That's just the federal government.
Vehicles. Can you believe that? Over 500,000 buildings and vehicles. Remember part of the Harry Brown plan to help pay down the debt? Sell off this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
The federal government pays, you ready for this? They pay $24 billion a year on fuel, tax-free, which accounts for 1.5% of the total that our country spends on fuel.
And as long as we're going on as long as you're mentioning the fuel tax-free, there's a proposal to raise the fuel tax in Illinois another 13 cents a gallon.
Yeah, thanks. That's going to help. And yet some people...
And people said that having a Republican governor would change things in this state. Yeah, yeah, it changed. It changed the initial after the governor's name from a D to an R. That's it.
And some people insist, they demand that government need to enforce even more useless regulations over our lives to help save a planet that doesn't need to be saved. Look, just like healthcare. The entity that declines healthcare claims more than anybody else, Medicare. Why would you trust your government to take over healthcare? The worst offender in environmental issues and the worst at following its own rules is the government. Why should you trust the government to fix a planet? It's absurd.
It comes back to something that I say all the time when I'm railing on conspiracy theorists. They've got their fantastical conspiracy theories that really mean nothing in the large scope of things, and the government is glad that they're doing chasing stuff like things that don't exist, like 9/11 inside job, chemtrails, and all this other nonsense, because that way they can hide the real conspiracy, like the pollution at Hanford Reach, like all of the vehicles that they own, like all of the buildings that they own, all of the money they're wasting on stuff that isn't effective. They're more than happy to have those people chase ghosts, when if they really could open their eyes, the government would be in trouble, would be in serious trouble with all of this crap. But they'd rather have, the only conspiracy the biggest conspiracy I believe in is that the government is keeping these people, chasing these things, so that they won't see what's going on. But that's a side topic. But these are real conspiracies. These are real things that need to be addressed. And don't trust the government. Don't trust the government on this stuff. It's the fox guarding the hen house all the time. And Penn Jillette once said that, and actually, if you haven't seen his episode of his show BS about Mount Rushmore, do it, because they end with something really awesome. But when somebody says there ought to be a law, no, there oughtn't to be a law.
Right.
These laws aren't affecting it. The only one getting hurt by all of this stuff is you and me, the average person.
Yeah.
All of these taxes, you got the $5 fee that you got to pay whenever you take a tire back to, hey, it goes on a pile in. Isn't there like a huge tire fire in Gary, Indiana, like all the time or something? Whenever I hear of a tire fire, it's always in Gary or Springfield. Springfield, The Simpsons. A Springfield tire fire. And and it's hurting us. We're the ones bearing the brunt of all this ridiculous regulation. Where if they took the $5 fee off of batteries and tires and all of that, we might be able to go buy a vehicle that's more energy efficient, that's less polluting. We might be able to afford to go buy a Tesla, not right away, but after several years.
Go ahead.
A lot of this stuff is just having the opposite effect of what it was intended for.
Yeah, and people sometimes they will challenge me, like they'll say, well, if capitalism is so good, then what about like the Exxon oil spill? And I'll say, look, we don't have any illusion that private entities won't sometimes have accidents or disasters that harm the environment. But the thing is, when they do, they are held responsible. you know, and that they can bear consequences. You know, what's going to happen to the government when they do these things? Nothing. You know, there's no accountability. And, you know, and I always tell people, for anything they expect the government to solve, next time you go to get your car registration renewed or your driver's license renewed, go into the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, see how things are running there, or the next time you go to the post office, ask yourself, are these the people who I want in charge of the environment? Because that's what it amounts to.
Ask, just not even that, just ask if these are the people you want in charge, period.
Yeah, or not only of the environment, of the healthcare, or of your children's education, or anything else that's important. You know, Harry Brown says this about education, but it could apply to the environment as well. Why do we need the government involved with education? Because it's important. Well, if it's important, you should want government to stay out of it. And the same is true.
Exactly. Look, and then you know, here's an example of how government handles this. 2010, Barack Obama, he had previously professed he was going to do it, but he started a plan to reduce the government's carbon emissions by 28%. That, if he was able to implement it, didn't get anywhere close. But that would have accounted for a rollback to about 2008 levels.
In other words, it's like saying you're going to empty a bucket of water by 20%, and the bucket is like the size of a 32-ounce cup, and all you need is like like 2 or 3 tablespoons of water.
Yeah, while you're standing.
There's not much effect. It's not going to do much anyway.
But I empty a bucket by 20% while I'm standing out in the rain. It's absurd.
Exactly.
Remember, this is the same government that refuses to permit construction of nuclear power plants because they're so dangerous. And they can be, but today's nuclear power plant is dramatically safer, and most of them are safe, by the way, always have been, and dramatically more efficient than they've ever been. Yet we keep using 40-year-old technology. But part of the president's plan to reduce these carbon emissions is to build a naval carrier nuclear strike force. Oh, it's okay for the government to use nuclear power, just not you.
And the thing is that they're extending these nuclear power plants well beyond their life cycle. I live like 5 miles from Dresden Nuclear Power Plant, which is the oldest operating commercial nuclear power plant in the country, if not the world. And it's like 20 years past its lifespan, and they just keep extending it. And there's I firmly am waiting for a major event to happen over here. And if this happens, the entire southwestern Chicago suburban area will be out of operation. It's on the Illinois River, which is like the major waterway in the state of Illinois. It empties into the Mississippi River, which empties into the Gulf of Mexico. You got a major disaster waiting over here. Yeah, they won't let us build new ones.
And you know what?
Instead, they're extending the lifespan of ones that should have been decommissioned decades ago.
There you go. And I'll respond to something Lex said, that the governments aren't held accountable for this. Well, sometimes they are, but not usually at federal level. In this country in particular, cities and states and townships, they get dinged by, the Fed or next level higher than them for environmental problems. And so think about this. You've got, Georgia, just one state, over $1 million in pollution fines over the last 10 years or so, payable to the federal government. So you have the federal government using your tax money. Remember, the only source of income they have is you. They use your tax money to enforce these regulations. Your local government gets dinged for them and pays millions of dollars in fines, which is also your money.
Yeah, and of course, obviously, the federal government, they get away scot-free and of course, they're the biggest polluter. And Harry Brown pointed out that the federal government owns 30% of the land in this country, and he wanted to sell a great bulk of that, to get it down to probably, from about 30% to 5%, and use a lot of that money to pay down the national debt. And a lot of it is very, very usable land that the private sector could use, for recreation, ranching, whatever. And furthermore, the more land you have in private hands, the less chance you're going to have an environmental disaster on it, because people generally take care of what they own.
Right.
I was just looking to see if I could find something about the fines that the environmental fines that the state of Illinois has had to pay, but I haven't been able to find anything real quick. Oh, there's our 5-minute mark. I mean, it's. And a lot of people are like, well, what would we do without the government? Well, you know what? I'm not asking for an end to the government. I'm not an anarchist. I don't think that we would get along very well without a government. I think government is inefficient, and I think there are very few things that the government should do. The very least, courts and roads, and even roads should be opened up to competition.
Yes.
Cops. Let's just say government cops have been in the news quite a bit lately, and leave it at that. But I'm not asking for anarchy. I'm not asking for no government at all. What I am asking for is sanity.
Yeah,
I can't expect the government to be our babysitter. I mean, it's there's the old thing of Uncle Sam. I gave it I changed it from Uncle Sam to Aunt Samantha. And that's exactly what it is. I mean, we're wanting a nanny to come in and babysit us all the time. When most people, and there are people in organizations that do need babysitting. I don't disagree with that, and I think there should be consequences for actions. But if you give them a little bit, they're going to take a lot. I mean, you can't just go out there and say, such and such is doing X, because if that happens, then not only X, but X, Y, and Z will be prohibited for you to do, regardless of what it is, whether it's good or whether it's not. But it's there are no easy answers, no easy solutions. But
government's not
as I said before, I don't know that libertarianism will work, but I do know what isn't working, and what isn't working is what we have now.
Stop doing that.
Yeah, doctor, it hurts when I do that.
Don't do that.
And exactly. You mentioned that the only difference with this new governor is that he has an R instead of a D next to his name. Sadly, for about 2/3 of the voting public, that is called simply the party that the guy belongs to, and that false and dangerous left-right dichotomy is one of the things that's tearing the country apart, because people always assume that the other party is going to do better, when in fact, I always point out the biggest difference by far between the two major parties is their marketing. Their marketing is far more than the way they govern.
Yep. And with that, we're going to have to start wrapping it up here. We only got a couple of minutes left.
Indeed.
Once again, you can leave us a voicemail on our voice line, 815-200-4912. Our Twitter is thesideproject2 at Twitter. Our email is thesideproject2@gmail.com. And our hashtag is #TSPLive if you've got anything you want to bring to our attention. And finally, if you want to get to the archives of our show, you can go to tsplive.com. That's our main site. We're on iTunes. RadioFubar.com is where you can hear the live show every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Central. If you get to us on Facebook, we will send out a link to the video feed. And that, once again, that's every Saturday, 9 a.m. You can also circle us on Google+, where you'll also get the invite. We're also on the TuneIn Radio on your smartphone, tablet, or your Roku box. You can either search for Side Project Live. We have our own channel on there now. Or if you search for Radio Fubar, you can catch our live show on there, and plus all of the other awesome shows on Radio Fubar. Every Sunday, right after noon on tuiville.com, just around noon, you can hear a repeat of our show. If you'd like to support the show, you can go to Patreon, patreon.com/TSPLive. You can make a low per episode donation. And apparently we still have t-shirts in the Radio Fubar store, so that's radiofubar.bigcartel.com, so you can visit there. And that is all of the pertinent info. So once again, from still reigning Morris, Illinois, this is Jimmy G.
From the rather wet Lockport, Illinois, Eric Ferguson.
Yes.
And from the relatively dry Indianapolis, Lex Zorn.
You're doing something wrong, Lex. We'll see you all again next week, 9 a.m. Saturday, Central Normal Standard Time. And we'll go from there. So we will talk to you all later.
Yeah.
intro and outro music is the song Springtide by the band Springtide. Visit them at www.springtide.jp.